I'm Poppy Campos, 29, and I built a quiet life around loyalty, no spotlight, just showing up. For years, I was the one holding things together behind the scenes, taking care of my grandfather when no one else would. But when my own family mocked me at his wake and called me the Maid, I made a decision that changed everything. Ever been dismissed by the very people you sacrificed everything for? Drop your story in the comments, you're not the only one. Before I share what happened, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to draw the line with people who took you for granted, hit that like button and subscribe. What came next caught everyone off guard. My name is Poppy Campos, and I was raised more by my grandfather than anyone else. Growing up, my mom was in and out of our lives. Some years she was trying, other years she just wasn't around. My dad disappeared before I turned 3. So when I was little and someone asked where I felt safest, the answer was always easy: Grandpa's house. He lived in a modest brick bungalow in the suburbs with creaky floorboards, mismatched furniture, and a fridge that always had lemon pound cake and ginger ale. He was the only consistent adult in my life. And somehow, even as a kid, I understood what that meant. That when it came to him, I had to show up. Every weekend and most summers, I stayed at Grandpa's. My cousins saw it as a punishment when they had to visit. They'd groan and complain that his house was boring or smelled weird. But I loved it. I learned how to cook watching him make fried eggs in the mornings, and he let me sit at the table with him while he did his bills, teaching me the difference between what you want and what you need. By the time I turned 13, it wasn't just about visits anymore. I started staying overnight during the week if my mom had work or wasn't around. It was subtle at first. An extra night here. A forgotten pickup there. Eventually, it just became routine. His place was quieter, safer, more stable. It's where I did my homework, where I ate actual meals, and where I learned what reliability looked like. By high school, I was the one making the meals. My cousins lived in bigger houses. Their parents, my aunts and uncles, were all successful in different ways: attorneys, tech consultants, even one who married into money. Their kids took ski trips, went to music camps, wore designer backpacks. And while they were off being curated and chauffeured, I was the one refilling Grandpa's prescriptions and checking his blood sugar. By 17, I knew his doctor's names, his pharmacy password, and how to advocate for him at appointments when the staff talked around him. When he had minor surgery my junior year, I slept in the hospital chair next to his bed and missed 2 exams. No one offered to take my place. When I graduated high school, I didn't move away for college. I commuted to the local community college and worked part-time at a bookstore so I could still be around to help Grandpa. At that point, his mobility was worsening. I did his grocery shopping, helped with bathing on the bad days, drove him to church when he wanted to go. He insisted on paying me back for gas, but I always declined. He had already given me more than I could ever repay. It never occurred to me that anyone in the family would question why I was there. He needed me. That was enough. But apparently, it wasn't enough for them. When my cousins visited for the holidays, or more accurately, when their parents forced them to stop by on Christmas, they would breeze in like royalty. Dropping off expensive gifts Grandpa didn't want, snapping a photo for social media, and leaving within an hour. I'd be the one sweeping pine needles off the carpet afterward, setting out his nighttime meds, heating up leftovers they never touched. No one ever said thank you. They just referred to me in a way that made my stomach twist. "She's always here," one cousin muttered once, barely whispering. Like, is she his nurse or something? Another time, my aunt said, "It's nice that you have the flexibility to help. Some of us don't have that luxury." As if what I was doing was a sabbatical. Not keeping him alive and comfortable. The term that finally stuck, though never said directly to my face, was the maid. It started as a joke from one of the younger cousins. I had come out of the laundry room with a basket and caught him whispering, "Why is the maid always around?" to his sister. She snorted. I didn't say anything. I never did. But later that night, I scrubbed the dishes with a little more pressure than usual. It was easier for them to reduce me to a role: cleaner, driver, assistant, caregiver. That way they didn't have to think about the fact that I was doing the work they weren't. That I was there when Grandpa fell getting out of bed. That I was the one who cleaned up the blood when his nosebleeds wouldn't stop, or sat with him through dizzy spells, or called the ambulance the night his breathing turned shallow. But I didn't correct them. I didn't need to. Grandpa knew. Sometimes, when we'd sit in the backyard and he was in one of his more reflective moods, he'd look at me and say things like, "You know, I'm not sure where I'd be if you hadn't stuck around." Or, "You turned out good. Real good. I hope you know that." He wasn't a man of flowery words, but I understood what he meant. That I was his person. The one he counted on. In my early 20s, he started bringing up his will. Not in a dramatic way, just little hints here and there. "I'm getting my affairs in order," he'd say. "Don't want no fuss when I go." I'd nod, brush it off, change the subject. Talking about his death felt wrong. Too soon. But it wasn't. A year later, he got pneumonia. It hit him hard. The hospital stay was longer than expected, and when he came home, something had changed. His body was weaker. His voice raspier. He stopped going outside. Stopped finishing his meals. I kept thinking he'd bounce back, like he always did. He didn't. During his final month, the rest of the family started popping up more often. Not to help. Just to observe. They'd make comments about the house. About how much this place must be worth now, or ask me if Grandpa had someone handling the finances. I knew what they were getting at. Still, I stayed quiet. The night he passed, I was sitting next to his bed, holding his hand. He wasn't conscious. But I told him it was okay to go. That I'd be okay. That I was grateful. The funeral was set for the following week. His lawyer called me 3 days later and said, "You should attend the will reading." He insisted you be there. I didn't expect anything. Maybe a small sum. Maybe one of his war medals or something personal. That would have been more than enough. What I didn't realize was that everything was about to change, not just for me, but for everyone who had treated me like I was disposable. And it all started with one sentence at the wake: "Why is the maid here?" But we'll get there. It started about 8 months before Grandpa passed. He had a small stroke one morning while making toast. I heard the crash from the other room. His hand had jerked mid-motion and knocked over the plate. When I found him, he was standing, dazed, his face slightly drooped on one side, the butter knife still in his hand like he'd forgotten what it was for. The hospital kept him for 3 days, ran every test they could think of, then sent him home with new medications, a follow-up schedule, and a warning: "He'll be slower now. Might get confused. You'll need to monitor that." So I did. I rearranged my schedule at the bookstore, moved all his pill times into a whiteboard chart, and added new numbers to his emergency contact list in extra-large font. At first, I thought the stroke might bring the family closer, or at least shake them into showing up more. For a little while, it seemed like that might happen. My aunt, his only daughter, my mom's older sister, started coming around once a week. Always with my cousin Jordan in tow. Jordan was the one everyone bragged about. He had a job at some boutique finance firm in the city, wore blazers even on weekends, and had this overconfident way of talking like he was already somebody's boss. I hadn't seen him in almost 2 years before he suddenly appeared in Grandpa's living room, talking about care plans and property taxes like he was the executor of the estate. They never asked how I was managing. The visits were never longer than 30 minutes. My aunt would bring sugar-free muffins Grandpa didn't like, glance around at the furniture like she was cataloging it, then pull out her phone halfway through every conversation. Jordan would sit too close to Grandpa on the couch, talking loudly and slowly, like his grandpa was hard of hearing, which he wasn't. One time I caught him pointing to a section of the house and saying, "You know, this back area would make a great den if someone ever renovated it." Just saying. Another time, he waited until I stepped into the kitchen, then lowered his voice. I couldn't hear the full conversation, but I caught enough to know it was about me. "She's still living here?" he asked, laughing. "Doing what exactly? Caregiving or squatting?" I didn't say anything. Not then. But the way my hands clenched around the kettle handle, I was seconds away from boiling. Things only got worse after Grandpa's short-term memory started slipping. It wasn't drastic, not at first. But he'd repeat questions. Forget the day. Mix up doctor appointments. I started keeping a log of anything unusual, just in case. My aunt used the memory lapses to her advantage. She started suggesting things, subtly at first. Dad, I think it's time we got some professional help in here. Nat's doing a great job, but this is really more than one person can handle. I knew what that meant. They didn't want me there. Then Jordan asked me, casually over coffee one afternoon, so, do you keep track of your hours? I blinked. Sorry. He stirred his mug like it was just a normal question. I mean, you're doing full-time work, right? Just wondering if it's all, documented. Makes things easier for everyone when it comes time to sort out the estate. I laughed, mostly from disbelief. No, I don't bill Grandpa for helping him bathe or take his meds. Jordan smiled, like I'd said something naive. I didn't mean it like that. It's just, a lot of people take advantage of situations like this. Situations like what? Loving someone through their last years? It became a pattern. They'd drop in with zero warning, make small talk with Grandpa, ignore me unless they were asking something technical like where his insurance paperwork was, and then leave with vague promises to circle back soon. One Saturday, I came home from running errands and found a nurse I didn't recognize sitting in the kitchen. Hi, you must be Poppy, she said brightly. Your aunt scheduled a home health consultation. Just checking in on a few things. No one had told me. Grandpa was confused. She said it'd help, he told me, shrugging. You were out, so I figured. I nodded and thanked the nurse for her time, then called my aunt. Next time you want to bring strangers into the house, maybe run it by the person who lives here, I said. There was a pause, then a clipped, it's not your house, Poppy. That was the first time she said it out loud. The second time was worse. I'd come back from one of Grandpa's cardiology appointments. He was wiped out, napping in the recliner, and noticed the office door was cracked open. It was usually shut. I peeked in and saw my aunt and Jordan at the desk, flipping through a manila folder. When they saw me, neither looked guilty. Just mildly annoyed, like I'd interrupted something. Just looking for Grandpa's deed, my aunt said calmly. There's been a lot of confusion around assets lately. We're just getting organized. You could have waited for me to be home, I said. We tried calling, Jordan chimed in. Didn't want to bother you, though. I mean, I'm sure caregiving takes a toll. You've been doing this a long time. The insinuation was obvious. That maybe I was tired. Or unstable. Or worse, too close to the situation to be trusted with it. But I stayed quiet. That's what I did. I cooked dinner that night like usual. I helped Grandpa with his blood pressure cuff. I locked the office door after they left. I knew something was coming. A shift. A move. A conversation where they'd finally say what they really thought. But I didn't expect it to happen the way it did at the wake. In front of everyone. In front of me. Why is the maid here? Jordan laughed. I hadn't even taken my coat off yet. And what happened next didn't just change the room. It changed everything. The funeral arrangements were made without me. No one called. No one asked my input. No one even bothered to check if I was available. I found out the date of the wake through a forwarded email. It was sent to a long list of family members, most of whom I hadn't spoken to in years. The subject line read, "Celebrating the life of Charles Campos." Nothing in the body of the message acknowledged that I'd lived with him, cared for him, or sat beside him when he took his final breath. Just a bulleted list of times and addresses. The wake was scheduled for the following Thursday at a private event space downtown. Not the church Grandpa had attended for nearly 40 years. Not the small chapel near our neighborhood where his closest friends could easily get to. No, this was a sleek, upscale venue with valet parking and white tablecloths. It felt curated. Sanitized. I stared at the email for a long time. Read it twice. Then closed my laptop without responding. The day of the wake, I debated not going at all. What would have happened if I hadn't shown up? Would they have even noticed? But in the end, I knew I had to be there for him. Even if I wasn't welcome. I wore plain black slacks, a dark coat, and low heels. I pinned my hair back the way Grandpa liked it, simple, out of my face. No makeup beyond concealer and chapstick. I didn't own anything designer. That wasn't me. Never had been. The venue was already crowded when I arrived. Clusters of people gathered near the entrance, some hugging, others laughing too loudly, holding glasses of wine like it was a networking event. I stepped in quietly, hoping to slip through without being noticed. But that was too optimistic. I had barely made it past the coat check when I heard it. "Why is the maid here?" It was Jordan. His voice wasn't subtle. He said it loudly, like a punchline delivered with perfect timing. He was standing with two other cousins and someone I didn't recognize, maybe a girlfriend, maybe just another guest. "I thought this was for family," he added, smirking. The words didn't just sting, they landed hard. I felt the air in the room shift. A few heads turned. Some people pretended not to hear. Others stared directly at me like they were waiting to see how I'd respond. No one said anything to defend me. Not my aunt. Not the uncles who used to ruffle my hair as a kid. Not the cousins I'd shared playgrounds and birthday cakes with. It was as if I'd walked into someone else's story by mistake. Like I didn't belong. Like I'd shown up uninvited to a party I had planned from behind the scenes. I stood still for a moment, just breathing. Then I walked past them. Quietly. Without a word. Inside the main room, the atmosphere was polished and impersonal. Tables lined with photo boards that didn't include the most recent years of Grandpa's life. No pictures of him in the garden where we used to sit every Sunday. No shots of us at the kitchen table playing cards. It was all old, filtered snapshots, him in uniform, at weddings, holding babies that were now grown. The version of Grandpa they had chosen to present wasn't the man I knew in his final years. It was the version that looked best in a frame. I found a spot near the back of the room and stayed there. I didn't try to mingle. Didn't force conversation. A few people nodded at me. A few others whispered to each other while glancing in my direction. Jordan passed by at one point, made eye contact, and offered a smug half-smile. "You know," he said, lowering his voice, "there's a lot of pressure at events like this. We've all got our roles to play. You shouldn't take things so personally." I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. The lawyer arrived about 20 minutes later. Mr. Harlow. Tall, gray-haired, polite in that stiff way lawyers often are. He had been Grandpa's estate planner for years. I recognized him from 2 earlier meetings, though we hadn't spoken directly in any detail. I watched him greet my aunt with a handshake. She gestured broadly to the crowd and said something I couldn't hear. Jordan hovered nearby, clearly waiting to be included. Then Mr. Harlow glanced toward me. He made his way through the crowd, weaving past half-filled wine glasses and forced smiles. When he reached me, he lowered his voice. "Miss Campos," he said. "Would you mind staying after the service? Mr. Campos requested that you be present for the initial will review." I blinked. "Of course." He nodded once, then turned and walked back toward the family cluster. I didn't think much of it at the time. Maybe Grandpa had left me something small, a letter, a keepsake. He'd mentioned wanting me to have his watch. I figured it was that. But from across the room, I noticed something shift. My aunt's face had gone pale. Her expression tightened as Mr. Harlow spoke. Jordan looked over his shoulder at me, brows furrowed. Whatever had been shared in that brief exchange unsettled them. Still, no one approached me. I stood through the eulogies. Listened to people speak about Grandpa's strength, his integrity, his impact on the community. Some stories were accurate. Others were exaggerated. Some were just plain fiction. When the microphone was opened for anyone to share a memory, I stepped forward. My hands shook slightly as I walked to the front. I didn't prepare a speech. I just told the truth. I talked about the way he made pancakes on Sundays, always flipping the first one too early because he was impatient. I mentioned how he used to whistle off-key when he watered the plants. I described the porch swing we'd sit on during thunderstorms, just listening. He was more than just a grandfather to me, I said quietly. He was my home. No one clapped. That wasn't the tone of the event. But the silence that followed felt heavier than any applause. After the service, as people started filing out, Mr. Harlow approached me again. "Would you come with me, please?" I followed him to a smaller side room. My aunt, Jordan, and 2 other cousins were already there. They looked tense. "This won't take long," Mr. Harlow said, unfolding a single-page summary from his briefcase. "Mr. Campos's final will was updated 6 months ago. It names one primary beneficiary." He paused, let the words hang in the air. "Puppy Campos." No one moved. My aunt finally spoke. That must be a mistake. It's not, Mr. Harlow replied. The documentation is clear. Ms. Campos is the sole beneficiary of the estate. That includes the house, the accounts, the investments, and all personal assets. Jordan's mouth opened, then closed again. My aunt's face went blank. She's not just family, Mr. Harlow added, almost as an afterthought. She's the one who is there. The room was silent. Dead silent. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. I stayed until the last guest left. Not because I wanted to, but because walking out first would have made it feel like I was surrendering something. Giving them the final word. I stood near the far wall as people trickled out, watching them hug, murmur condolences, and exchange contact information like they were leaving a conference. No one offered me a seat during the service. Not even the rows marked reserved for family. I wasn't surprised. I'd learned a long time ago not to expect consideration from people who didn't think I belonged. So I stood, hands clasped in front of me, silent, still, eyes fixed on the small photo of Grandpa they'd placed near the podium. It was one of his younger pictures, from his military days, serious, crisp, formal. Not the man I remembered. The man who wore slippers with holes in the heels, who made scrambled eggs too runny, who cried the day we planted his late wife's favorite tulips in the backyard. But still, it was him. Just a version they found easier to honor. After it ended, I stepped outside. The air was colder than I expected. I didn't have gloves, just shoved my hands deep into my coat pockets and breathed in the silence. That's when someone tapped my shoulder. "Excuse me," a man said. Late 70s, maybe. Tall, with a hunched back and kind eyes. "You're Poppy, right?" I nodded. "I'm George. Your grandfather and I played chess together every Thursday at the senior center. I just wanted to tell you," he paused, adjusting his scarf. "He talked about you like you were his own daughter." I didn't respond right away. My throat tightened too fast for words. "He always said you were the reason he made it through the last few years with dignity. Said you gave him something to look forward to every day." I blinked quickly, trying not to cry in front of a stranger. "Thank you," I finally said. He nodded, gave my arm a gentle squeeze, then walked off toward the parking lot. That moment stayed with me more than anything else that day. Because no one in my family had ever said it. Not once. They'd told me to be useful. To keep things running. To be patient, to be helpful, to be quiet. But no one had ever acknowledged what I had actually been doing. Not just tasks, but love. Not just presence, but partnership. I went home that night and sat in the living room in silence. Grandpa's chair still faced the TV. His slippers were still by the door. I couldn't bring myself to move anything yet. I thought about the years I'd spent in that house. The early mornings making oatmeal just the way he liked it. The afternoons chasing down prescriptions when his blood pressure spiked. The nights I'd wake up at 2 a.m. just to make sure he hadn't fallen out of bed. I'd done all of it quietly. Without recognition, without expectation, but also without boundaries. I hadn't realized how much I'd internalized the idea that invisibility was the price of being allowed to stay. That as long as I didn't ask for anything, I was welcome. The unspoken deal, they'd pretend not to notice me, and I'd pretend not to care. I thought back to every time someone walked through that front door and called out, "Where's Poppy?" Not because they wanted to say hello, but because they needed help finding a charger, or locating a document, or reheating a meal. I'd been their background. A fixture. A warm body who took care of the things no one else wanted to do. But Grandpa hadn't seen me that way. I pulled out the small box he kept on the hallway shelf, the one where he stored stamps, old receipts, and notes to self written on the backs of grocery lists. Tucked between a pharmacy pamphlet and a scratch-off ticket was an envelope with my name on it. The handwriting was shaky, faded. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper. Short, only a few lines. "Nat, if you're reading this, I'm probably not around anymore. I hope you're still drinking too much tea and forgetting to charge your phone. You've done more for me than anyone ever has. And not just the care stuff. You brought peace into this house. You made me feel like I mattered. You're the best part of my life's second act. I hope you know that. Love you always, G." I sat with that letter in my lap for a long time. It didn't erase the things my family had said. It didn't undo the humiliation of being mocked at a wake. But it anchored me. It reminded me that the person who actually knew me, who saw the nights I stayed up until 3 a.m. after Grandpa's oxygen dropped, or the mornings I skipped work to argue with insurance companies on his behalf, that person had valued me more than words. Later that week, I got a call from the lawyer's office to schedule the formal reading of the will. "I'm assuming they've told you by now," Mr. Harlow said gently. "Sort of," I said. There was a pause. "You don't need to do anything just yet. There'll be meetings. Paperwork. But for now, just know it's all in order." I thanked him and hung up. That night, my aunt left me a voicemail. "Hi, Poppy. I'd like to talk. I think we all need to sit down as a family and discuss next steps. I'm sure Grandpa meant well, but this whole thing's caused some confusion. Let me know when you're available." No apology. No acknowledgement of how I was treated. Just a pivot. A reframing. Like maybe if she said confusion enough times, it would cancel out the facts. I didn't call back. Not yet. I spent the next few days doing what I'd always done. I took out the garbage. I vacuumed the hallway. I organized the mail and checked Grandpa's voicemail just to hear his voice one more time. But something had shifted. For the first time, I wasn't doing it because I had to. Or because I was afraid no one else would. I was doing it for me. Because I wanted to close this chapter on my own terms. And maybe, just maybe, begin the next one on terms I actually chose. The will reading was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 10 a.m. at the lawyer's office downtown. I wasn't on the original email thread, not surprising, but Mr. Harlow called me personally. He insisted you be present, he said. When I arrived, the receptionist gave me a surprised look, like maybe I'd wandered in by mistake. I didn't flinch. She pointed me to the conference room where the rest of them were already seated. My aunt sat at the head of the table like she was chairing a board meeting. Jordan lounged next to her in a pressed shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows like he'd just come from a golf lesson. A couple of cousins were scattered on either side. I noticed how no one offered me a seat, but Mr. Harlow motioned to a chair at the opposite end of the table. I took it quietly. There was an energy in the room I couldn't quite name, restless, confident, a little rehearsed. Like they'd already split everything up in their heads. Mr. Harlow opened a folder and cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. Charles Campos updated his will 6 months ago, in the presence of legal counsel and a third-party witness, both of whom confirmed his mental clarity at the time. Everything was documented, notarized, and filed appropriately." He looked at my aunt. She gave a polite nod, a little impatient. Per his request, I'll now read his final instructions aloud. The room quieted. Chairs adjusted. A pen clicked. "I, Charles Franklin Campos, being of sound mind and judgment, declare this my final will and testament. I leave all my assets, property, savings, and possessions to my granddaughter, Poppy Campos, in full and without condition." There was a beat of silence so sharp it felt like a dropped glass. Then chaos. "What the hell?" Jordan said first, sitting up straight. "That can't be right." My aunt shot him a look, then turned sharply toward the lawyer. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. My father was not well these past few months. He got confused easily. He forgot birthdays. He sometimes called Poppy by my name. Are you seriously suggesting he intended to cut out his own children?" "He didn't cut anyone out," Mr. Harlow said calmly. "This will simply names Ms. Campos as the sole beneficiary. The rest of the family isn't mentioned." "That's not possible," she snapped. He was not lucid. He could barely get through dinner without asking the same question twice. "You're telling me he had the mental capacity to restructure an entire estate?" "He did. And I have the recordings to prove it. Video and audio. Dated and timestamped." He was direct. Unambiguous. Jordan stood up. "You must have manipulated him." That word. It landed in my chest like a brick. "Excuse me?" I asked, speaking for the first time. "You lived with him," he said, arms crossed. "You had access to his meds. His bank info. You were in his ear 24/7. It's not hard to imagine you, nudging him. Planting ideas." I didn't respond right away. Mr. Harlow spoke for me. Mr. Campos explicitly stated that Poppy was not only his caregiver, but his closest family member. He was aware of her contributions, her sacrifices, and her loyalty. He said, on record, that she was the one who showed up. Every day. Without fail. That mattered to him. My aunt's voice broke in. So what, you're telling me everything? The house? The savings? Even the antique collection? Just, all to her. Yes, the lawyer said. All to her. Jordan let out a sharp laugh. Unbelievable. This is theft. Mr. Harlow remained calm. It's a legal decision. Your grandfather made his wishes clear. The room was thick with tension. One of the other cousins mumbled something under his breath. My aunt stood abruptly, grabbing her purse with jerky movements. We'll contest this, she said. There's no way this holds up in court. We'll challenge everything. Medical records, capacity, undue influence. All of it. You're welcome to try, Mr. Harlow replied. But you should know that Charles anticipated this. He left behind a signed affidavit, an independent neuropsychological evaluation, and an additional letter addressed to the court, if it comes to that. I suggest you think very carefully about whether you want to proceed. She paused. I watched her recalibrate in real time. This wasn't about money, she said sharply, turning to me now. You made this ugly. You think this makes you part of the family? It doesn't. It never will. I didn't flinch. I'm not the one who made it ugly. They left in waves. Jordan lingered just long enough to give me a final glare, then followed his mother out the door. When it was quiet again, Mr. Harlow slid a smaller envelope across the table. He wrote you a letter, he said. Personal. I was instructed to give it to you once everything had been read. I took it but didn't open it yet. Thank you, I said. He nodded. Your grandfather was very clear about what he wanted. Don't let them rewrite that just because they don't like how it turned out. I left the office slowly. The city felt louder than usual, but also strangely distant, like everything was happening half a block away. I walked past a bakery and realized I hadn't eaten. My stomach was in knot, but I forced myself to go inside, order a coffee, and sit by the window. I pulled out the envelope and opened it. Inside was a short note, written in the same shaky handwriting I recognized from grocery lists and sticky notes. Nat, I know this might get messy. I wish I could have spared you that. But I also know you don't scare easy. I hope this gives you a shot at building the life you deserve. Not just surviving, living. Don't let them twist the story. You earned every bit of this. Love always, G. I read it twice. Then folded it and tucked it into my coat pocket like armor. I wasn't sure what the next few weeks would bring, calls, legal threats, maybe even the kind of forced family meetings they liked to pretend were civil. But I was done pretending. Done shrinking. Done absorbing insults just to keep the peace. This wasn't a windfall. This was recognition. This was what it looked like when someone who actually saw you made a decision to honor that, loudly, clearly, and without apology. And I wasn't going to apologize for it either. The threat started the day after the will reading. Not from lawyers, at least, not at first, but from family. My aunt called and left a voicemail I didn't bother saving. She accused me of hijacking Grandpa's estate, said I'd used emotional manipulation to isolate him, and warned that things would get very ugly if I didn't reconsider redistributing some of what he left me. Jordan followed it up with a text that read, "You should be ashamed. You preyed on a dying man. Everyone sees it for what it is." Everyone, apparently, didn't include Mr. Harlow. Or Grandpa's doctor. Or the neighbors who watched me shovel snow from the walkway every winter and haul groceries into the house week after week. It didn't include George from the senior center, who sent me a handwritten note that said, "He made the right choice." Don't let them make you forget that. But the silence from the rest of the family was louder than any insult. No one reached out to ask how I was handling things. No one checked in. No one offered to help with paperwork or arrangements. They just posted vague quotes on Facebook about betrayal and what real family looks like, clearly meant for me, then acted surprised when I didn't respond. I didn't fight back publicly. I didn't need to. The truth was in the documents, the timestamps, the receipts, the quiet routines I'd kept for years. Grandpa had made sure everything was clean. Tidy. Ironclad. He'd protected me from the backlash he must have known would come. The first few weeks were hard, though. Not legally, Mr. Harlow handled most of that, but emotionally. Moving through the house, knowing it was mine now, didn't feel triumphant. It felt complicated. I didn't want to change anything at first. I left his slippers by the door, kept his coat hanging on the rack, refilled the candy jar on the hallway table even though no one else was eating from it. But eventually, routines shifted. The mail stopped coming with his name. The utility bills changed to mine. I replaced the old drip coffee maker with one that didn't leak. Got rid of the broken recliner that squeaked every time he shifted his weight, though I kept the quilt he always draped over his legs. It's folded neatly on the new couch now, a soft thread tying the old life to the new one. Renovating the house wasn't about erasing him, it was about reclaiming space. I repainted the kitchen walls, fixed the squeaky cabinets, pulled up the stained carpet in the den, and found beautiful hardwood underneath. Grandpa had always said he wanted to get around to it, but never did. I imagined him watching as I worked, muttering, finally, with that dry little smile of his. Neighbors would stop by sometimes while I worked on the porch or carried tools inside. One of them, Mrs. Lee, brought me a casserole and told me, "He used to talk about you like you were his shadow. Said you had more grit than anyone in the family." That grit became useful fast. By mid-spring, my aunt sent a letter through her attorney. It was more posturing than anything, full of vague legal language about undue influence and reconsidering the fairness of the estate. Mr. Harlow responded with a copy of Grandpa's medical evaluations and the notarized affidavit explaining his decision. He made it clear there would be no renegotiation. They went quiet after that. At least legally. But socially? They dug in. I was disinvited from a cousin's baby shower without notice. The group text I used to be part of, sporadic as it was, went silent. At Thanksgiving, I wasn't even sent the address where dinner was happening. Someone, probably Jordan, started referring to me as the leech in group chats I wasn't supposed to see. But I did. Screenshots always find their way to you when people underestimate who still respects you. I could have defended myself. Could have posted my own narrative. Could have corrected every lie. But I didn't. Instead, I focused on building a life I didn't have to explain. I enrolled in a part-time certificate program in elder care and estate planning. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to understand the system better. I joined a local volunteer group that helped caregivers of aging relatives navigate resources, something I wish I'd had when I was 21 and Googling how to lift someone safely out of a bathtub at 2 a.m. The money Grandpa left me gave me breathing room. I wasn't rich, not in the flashy sense, but I didn't have to choose between groceries and car repairs anymore. I could fix the roof without panic. Pay tuition without juggling shifts. I could plan. And for the first time, I did. I turned the spare bedroom into a home office. Started consulting for local families who were dealing with the same maze of home care logistics I used to drown in. Word spread slowly, but within a few months, I had a steady stream of clients who just needed someone who'd been there. Someone who wouldn't talk down to them or make them feel like they were doing it wrong. I wasn't a professional in the traditional sense, but I was useful, needed, and respected. That mattered more than being liked. One afternoon, while I was updating some forms at the kitchen table, I got an unexpected knock at the door. It was Jordan. I didn't open it right away. Just looked at him through the glass for a moment. He looked different. Not dramatically, but enough. A little less polished. A little more tired. When I opened the door, he didn't try to come in. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "Just wanted to say something." I waited. He shifted his weight. "You don't have to believe this, but..." I didn't think it would play out like that. I thought he'd left something for everyone. I didn't think he'd leave it all to you. I raised an eyebrow. "Is that an apology?" "It's as close as you're gonna get," he said, half smiling. I didn't invite him inside. But I nodded. That was enough for now. After he left, I sat on the porch for a while, watching the neighborhood shift from daylight to evening. The house was quiet. Peaceful. Mine. And maybe that was the real transformation. Not the money. Not the title to the property. But the stillness. The ability to sit in a space and know I didn't owe anyone an explanation for being there. I'd been called a leech, a maid, an opportunist. But in the end, I was the one who stayed. Who showed up? Who remembered? And maybe that was enough. Maybe it always had been. It was 4 months after the will reading when my aunt reached out. I hadn't heard her voice since that day in the lawyer's office, when she told me I wasn't family and stormed out without waiting to hear the rest. The voicemail she left was short. Not emotional. Not apologetic. Just direct. Poppy, I'd like to come by the house. One last time. If that's all right. I played it twice, unsure whether I was surprised or just indifferent. The message didn't carry remorse. It wasn't phrased like someone extending an olive branch. It sounded like a formality, something she'd convinced herself she deserved. Still, I agreed. Carefully. I responded by text, not voice. I told her she could stop by. 1 hour. No guests. No discussion about the estate or the will. Just closure. She arrived on a Sunday afternoon. Alone. No makeup. No jewelry. She wore a wool coat that looked too big for her and shoes that hadn't been shined in a while. I watched her through the window before I opened the door, and for the first time in my life, she looked small. Not just physically. She seemed like someone who'd lost her footing and didn't know whether she wanted to get it back or stay down where it was quieter. When I opened the door, she hesitated. I didn't know if you'd actually say yes, she said. I stepped aside so she could walk in. I said yes. She moved through the hallway slowly, like she was afraid to disturb anything. The house didn't look the same anymore. The walls were a lighter color, the carpet had been pulled up, and the air didn't carry the same scent of eucalyptus and old leather it used to when Grandpa was alive. But it still had echoes of him. His favorite clock still hung in the kitchen. His coat still hung on the hallway hook. I hadn't removed that. Not yet. She paused near the dining table. He used to sit here with his puzzle books, she said. I nodded. He liked the ones with logic grids. He said they kept his brain from shrinking. She smiled, faintly, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to. We didn't sit down. Neither of us offered tea. It wasn't that kind of visit. After a while, she turned to me and said, I didn't know he loved you that much. The sentence came out plain, not bitter. Not softened, either. Just raw observation. I didn't take a breath before answering. He didn't hide it. You just never looked. She blinked, like she'd expected something else, maybe defensiveness, or maybe some invitation to argue. But I wasn't giving her either. She wandered into the living room and stood in front of the fireplace. Her hands were clasped, her back slightly hunched. She didn't touch anything. She just looked. You know, she said slowly, when my mom died, your grandmother, he wasn't like this. He didn't let people in the way he did with you. I didn't force my way in, I said. I know. That's not what I meant. She turned, finally meeting my eyes. It's just. I didn't know what he needed then. I don't think I ever asked. There was no apology in her words. But there was something close. A kind of quiet accountability, stripped of performance. She wasn't asking me to absolve her. Just stating a fact she couldn't ignore anymore. She stayed for another 10 minutes. Looked around once more. Then turned back toward the door. Thank you, she said. For what? For taking care of him. For not letting him die alone. I didn't answer. Not out of cruelty, but because there was nothing else to say. That had never been the question. She didn't hug me. She didn't cry. She just walked out the same way she came in, quietly, coat still too big, shoes clicking lightly against the floor. I didn't watch her leave. We don't talk often now. A birthday text here, a forwarded family update there. No pretense of closeness. No more strained invitations to brunches I was never welcome at. We've stripped away the fiction. The stories changed shape. Jordan sent a message a few weeks after her visit. A single line, she told me you were gracious. I wouldn't have been. I didn't respond. Being gracious hadn't been about generosity. It was about clarity. About understanding that their validation was never the thing I needed, and that seeing their regret, however late, wasn't my responsibility to fix. I think they expected to feel righteous in their anger. But the longer they sat with the truth, the harder that became. Because there was no scheme. No manipulation. Just a girl who stayed and a man who noticed. They expected scandal. Instead, they got silence. And in that silence, something shifted. The family still gets together. I'm not invited. And I don't need to be. I've built my own circles now. People who know me for who I am, not just the role I filled. People who ask how I'm doing, not what I can do for them. Sometimes I think about the way they used to look right through me. Like I was wallpaper. Necessary, but unremarkable. And how different that is from the way Grandpa looked at me when I brought him a cup of tea or reminded him to take his meds. Like I was his whole second chance. I still keep some of his routines. Still put a little sugar in my coffee, even though I like it black. Still play the old Sinatra station on Sunday mornings. Still check the porch light twice before bed. But I also started new things. Things that belong only to me. That chapter is closed. The house is quiet now, but it's mine. And in the stillness, I've started hearing my own voice again. It's been 2 years. The house is quieter than it used to be, but not empty. The walls have been repainted. The furniture's different. But the heart of it, the part that holds memory, is still intact. His watch is still on the bookshelf. The photo of us in the garden still sits by the entryway. I walk past it every day, and it reminds me not just of who he was, but of who I became while I was beside him. I've gone back to school. Evening classes at the community college, then a certificate in geriatric support services. It started with a curiosity, then became something more. A few people had asked for help after the story got out, a friend of a neighbor, a woman from church. At first it was casual, just advice over coffee. But it grew. Word spread. Now I run a small consulting practice, modest, local, intentional. I help families navigate care for aging relatives. I teach them how to advocate, how to build sustainable routines, how to see the person behind the diagnosis. It's not flashy, but it matters. And it's mine. People know who I am now. But more importantly, I know who I am. Not the help. Not the extra body in the room. Not the silent girl at the edge of the table. I'm the one who stayed. The one who chose to care when no one else wanted the job. The one who didn't ask for anything until someone who mattered insisted I deserved everything. The family is scattered. I hear about them through other people sometimes. Jordan moved to a new city. My aunt still hosts dinners, though I'm not invited. They're cordial now, in the abstract way people are when they're forced to acknowledge your existence, but can't quite look you in the eye. They stopped trying to reclaim the estate after the legal threats fizzled out. Every once in a while, I'll get a forwarded chain email or a group photo from someone who forgot I was no longer on the list. I don't check in. I don't retaliate. There's no point. They say time heals. But I don't think that's always true. I think time reveals. It shows you who stays consistent when no one's watching. It shows you who people become when they realize they no longer have power over you. A few months ago, I saw Jordan at the grocery store. He was standing in the produce section, checking avocados for ripeness. He didn't see me at first. When he did, he froze for just a second. Then he nodded. Just once. I nodded back. We didn't speak. It was enough. Forgiveness isn't about rebuilding what was. Sometimes it's just letting something stay where it fell. I've made peace with that. The legacy Grandpa left me wasn't the house or the savings or the quiet, sealed up well that stunned everyone. It wasn't even the business I've built or the independence I've earned. It was clarity. He taught me that dignity isn't something other people give you. It's something you protect, quietly, consistently, and without compromise. That love doesn't always look like words. Sometimes it looks like routine. Showing up. Making tea. Taking notes. Remembering the dosage. He used to say, you don't have to raise your voice when the truth is on your side. At the time, I thought it was just something old people said when they were tired of arguing. But now I understand. The truth doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs time. And space. And when it comes, it doesn't crash in. It walks through the door quietly, takes off its shoes, and sits down like it's always lived there. That's what I carry forward. I keep a copy of Grandpa's letter in my desk drawer. The original stays tucked between the pages of a book he used to read when he couldn't sleep, Collected Stories of E.B. White. Page 212. I don't open it often. I don't need to, because I remember every word. He called me the best part of his life's second act. And now, 2 years later, I believe him. Thanks for listening. Have you ever been written off by your own family, then had to prove your worth without saying a word? What would you have done in my place? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories about quiet strength, setting boundaries, and choosing yourself.